Mountain biking mechanicals always seem to happen at the worst possible times, but there's a few precautions you can take and some preventative maintenance that should keep you riding your bike more instead of fixing it. Here's a few suggestions. Punctures are probably the most common mechanical out on the trail. It's no surprise when there's rocks and roots and all sorts out there which can give you a flat. Now, if you're running inner tubes, you might want to consider going over to a tubeless setup. So there'll be sealant in your tyres instead of an inner tube. And these can seal any small holes that are created by things like thorns. Also, if you find you're still getting punctures with a tubeless setup, it might be that your weight or your style of riding is not suited to the casing of your tyre. So you can actually buy thicker, more durable casings on your tyre. So I've got Doddy's bike here, and as you can see, he's running the Enduro spec tyres here. Even though it's his trail bike, he could have run trail tyres, but being a slightly heavier rider because he's taller, and also coming here to Spain where it's super rocky, an Enduro tyre will offer a bit more protection from pinch flats where the rocks hit the rims on the wheel. A bit of preventative maintenance goes a long way to stopping mechanicals happening out on the trail. Ideally, every time you stop riding your bike, or maybe every time you wash it, you want to perform an M check. It's called an M check just because it reminds you to start at the bottom here, move up to the saddle, down to the bottom bracket, up to your cockpit and down to your front wheel. And generally picking up your bike and giving the wheels a wiggle and making sure everything is tight, making sure that back axle is tight and your rear triangle and everything is as it should be. The rear derailleur is another common casualty of mountain biking. Its location means it's quite susceptible to rock strikes. Now, obviously you can pick nice line choices and try and avoid that, but sometimes the inevitable does happen. Luckily, the derailleur is attached to the frame by a mech hanger, which is intentionally soft as it's designed to bend and break so that your derailleur or your frame doesn't. That's why it's always a good idea to bring a spare mech hanger with you, because if the unfortunate does happen, at least you can put a straight one back on the bike and your gears will be working perfectly. Another way to prevent damaging your derailleur is to make sure it's set up correctly. In particular, your higher and lower limit screws need to be set up for your gears and your rear cassette. If your lower limits aren't set correctly, then your derailleur could move too far over your lowest gear and the chain could fall into your spokes and pull your spokes out, and even worse, it could pull your derailleur into your wheel entirely and damage both of them. A broken chain can actually be one of the most painful mechanicals. It usually happens under load, and as a result you get thrown forward and you can bruise up your knees or even worse, go over the handlebars. The best thing to do is a bit of preventative maintenance here. It should be part of your M check to see if there's any damage or any twists. Or every time you clean it, you want to check to see if there's any cracks appearing in your chain. Also, check the life on the chain with a chain checker. Make sure it's not too stretched or worn and replace it regularly. It's also really good practice not to shift under load. So what that means is try not to change gear while you're applying serious pressure to the pedals, like climbing up a hill or sprinting. Brake mechanicals have got to be one of the scariest mechanicals to have. So you really want to be looking after your brakes, if nothing else. Always make sure that you've got good life in your brake pads, check them regularly. If your lever's starting to go back towards the bars, it could mean that you need to replace them. Also, if your levers are going back to the bars, but your pads are fine, it could be that the fluid inside the hoses are getting a bit old. I will bleed my brakes at least once or twice a year to make sure everything is fresh and in working order. Also, when you're cleaning your bike, make sure you cover those discs. You don't want any lubricant or any kind of silicone spray on those discs because you'll contaminate them. Well, hopefully that's given you a few ideas on how to prevent mechanicals in the future. But if we've forgotten any, then let us know down in the comments below and help out the GMBN community.